And moving on over to the markets now, and we're coming off a short week in the commodity markets due to the Thanksgiving holiday. However, we had some notable activity in the overseas markets. Beyond that, the Omicron variant of the COVID-19 virus has been making the rounds in the headlines. Here this week to discuss that and more is North Dakota State University ag economist Dr. Frayne Olson. Frayne, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Yeah, always my pleasure.
And starting things off, we had a short week due to the Thanksgiving holiday here in the U.S. Were there any notable developments in the overseas markets over the holiday weekend?
Well, just a couple of things. First, we got some reports from Australia that they had some very heavy rains, especially in kind of their southeastern growing region, New South Wales area. And there's some concerns about the wheat quality because they're nearing their harvest time window now. And so there's some concern about the wheat quality and how much of that wheat is going to turn out to be feed quality rather than a milling quality. They're anticipating a very large crop, but again, the quality profile, especially for wheat, is a very sensitive topic.
And Frayne, we've been seeing some fluctuation in wheat futures and a rise in export sales. To what can we attribute these shifts in momentum?
Well, okay, so there are a couple things going on. As I mentioned, there's some issues showing up in the Australian wheat. We already know, at least here in the northern plains and into Canada, the spring wheat crop is very, very tight because of the drought. So the high-end, the high-protein wheats, those blend wheats that we often use to get the quality products, the profile of flour that's normally needed is extremely tight supply. But we're also seeing global prices coming up, in particular because of some issues now showing up in Russia. Russia, even though they had a very good crop, the Russian government has put some export taxes on their wheat to try and keep domestic prices a little bit lower. So there's some food inflation going on in Russia. There's some concerns about the volume of exports from Russia into the global market. So they have a variable rate tax that they have now imposed. And those tax rates and as a result, global prices are starting to rise. The U.S. right now, because of some of the freight rates, the U.S. is a little bit out of the market in the global wheat area. But as in the last several weeks, we've started seeing some of those export shipping rates, the freight rates for bulk freight, starting to drop off a little bit. So we are starting to pick up some export business out of the U.S., which is a good thing. Again, we're going to be watching what's going on very, very closely when it comes to the wheat quality globally as well as the wheat supply. So we're starting to tighten up a little bit on our balance sheet on wheat.
And of course, corn exports and sales also ended on a marketing year high last week. How did that shake out, and how are things looking as trade ramps up after the holiday weekend?
Yeah, so typically we're from Thanksgiving into the Christmas holidays, or actually into the New Year, this tends to be a very quiet time period within the grain markets. It's the holiday doldrums, if you will. But we are seeing some pretty good, strong demand for U.S. corn. China is part of that. Of course, the big question is, what is the Chinese corn demand given the higher hog prices and the crushing margins for the soybeans coming out of China? We're a little bit concerned about some inflationary problems going on in China right now, and will they be coming into the U.S. market and purchasing as much corn and soybeans as we originally expected? But on the corn front, their purchasing seems to be on a regular pace. We look at our other major customers for corn, in particular Mexico and Japan. Again, they're purchasing on kind of a normal pace that we're seeing. We're also seeing some issues now, some questions and concerns showing up in southern Brazil with their rainfall. Now the crop that they're planting right now is their summer crop, which tends to be a bit smaller than their winter crop, which is the safrinha crop. So Brazil has two crops of corn that they normally plant and harvest. The second crop is the one that is the larger of the two, but we are watching what's going on in the first crop corn in Brazil as well. So there's a lot of little things that are adjusting. Our export pace out of the U.S. is good. Some of our major competitors in the form of Brazil and Argentina and Ukraine are competitive, but they don't quite have the volumes that are in exportable positions right now. So we're starting to see some of the global corn prices also be very supportive.
And of course, the big news last week was the Omicron variant. How much is this new COVID development looming over the market?
Yeah. So it's one of those things that we have in the back of our heads. It's not necessarily a direct impact on on grain prices directly, but indirectly, psychologically, it does have an impact on the marketplace. We're also watching then how is the investment community adjusting to this new information. So there are some concerns about global economic growth and what that's going to mean for exchange rates. So really that's an indirect effect, not necessarily a direct effect. So it is something the grain markets are watching, but we're kind of keeping an eye on the sidelines right now.
And Frayne, before we wrap up today, do you have any marketing or risk management advice you'd like to share with our viewers at home?
Yeah, I guess the major thing right now, especially for those that have old crop soybeans left, because of the rapid planting progress that they've had in Brazil, everybody right now is expecting a very large crop coming out of the Brazilian production season. So our export window for U.S. soybeans is going to be a little bit tighter, a little bit shorter than we normally see, if they, again, can get the rainfall and the kind of production that everybody's anticipating. So if you have old crop soybeans in the bin right now, I'd be watching the markets very, very closely, try and get those priced and hopefully delivered before probably the end of January. Normally we have into the February time period, but because of, again, the rapid planting progress and the early crop progress that they're having in Brazil, our export window out of the U.S. is going to be a bit shorter than normal. So just be watching that and trying to plan ahead.
I think that's going to wrap up our time this week. Frayne, thank you so much for your time today.
All right, thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to visit.